Hi everyone, so I'm reviewing Royal Jelly, which is directed and written by Sean Riley, and it's a horror movie about a high school bee enthusiast who meets another woman who's also obsessed with bees, and she ends up grooming this young girl to be a new hive queen. So I found this to be a really intriguing horror movie with a really original concept. And the only time I've seen bees in movies would be with the remake of The Wicker Man, with that very famous scene that I'm sure most people will be familiar with Nick Cage. So this was a very interesting film, and I found that it made quite a few references to other horror films, which I'm not sure was intentional by the director. But there was a good reference to Carrie with this outcasted high schooler who was relentlessly bullied by people, and she just didn't seem to fit in. And she had this kind of weird obsession with bees that nobody else understood. And there was a lot of visual motifs to blood as well, which I found quite interesting. And it did seem to reference The Witch as well. With this, there was a lot of the main girl, Asta. She's played by Elizabeth McCoy. When she is walking around, she was usually in like a white nightgown, which did remind me of The Witch. With the main character in that movie who seemed to be wandering around in a white nightgown, and there was some kind of supernatural evil, sinister force that was affecting the family in that movie, which was quite similar to this film. Whereas Asta, the protagonist in this movie, was quite isolated from her family, especially towards the third act when she met this woman who took her away to a secluded house and began to groom her to be this bee queen, which was quite unsettling and quite a sinister concept. But the girl was quite shy at first, and she ended up becoming more confident in herself because of the help of this lady. Who was played by Sherry Latenzi. I'm not sure if I pronounced that right, but they had quite an interesting bond where she sort of stepped in as a maternal role for Asta, whereas she had a horrible stepsister and a stepmother who didn't just treat her so badly and didn't understand her as a person. So it was quite interesting to see this bond she formed with this other woman who had the same interest in bees. But I did enjoy that aspect, and the concept was so interesting and different. And there was also a very effective score. Just trying to find the name. A very good score by Joe Hodgin. I'm not sure if I pronounced his name very well either, but it was a very good fairy tale dark soundscape, which was what opened the movie with a montage of Asta collecting the honey from the beehives. So we were introduced to her in quite a unsettling way with the music, so it sort of set up the horror atmosphere really well, I thought. But once she was brought to this house, I found the pacing to really grind to a halt. It seemed to slow quite a bit, and I understood it was for bringing suspense and building that suspense up to see what kind of horrors would happen at this house where she was being groomed and to be this bee queen. But it was quite a slow process, I thought, to actually get to the main horror towards the end, where there were some reveals of the really main villain and her true form. But it was a little bit of a slow pace, and it seemed to sort of grind quite a bit. And I didn't feel that there was enough characterization for the protagonist, Asta, and this lady who took her in. It was interesting that it formed this bond so suddenly because of their connection with this love for bees, but they didn't seem to have much of a backstory, either of them. You learned a little bit about Asta and her family, but and we know that she's a shy outcast, but there's not really much else to her, and there was a bit more focus on her becoming confident and being happy in herself. And that was shown when she started off quite geeky looking with some glasses, and she had like goth nails, and then she took the glasses off and she became more confident in herself. But there wasn't really much backstory for the woman who took her in. I'm really sorry, I've forgotten her name. I think it's Teresa is her name, the other bee enthusiast, and she didn't really have much of a backstory, which I found quite difficult to emotionally connect to the character. Both characters actually. I felt sympathy for Asta, but at the same time, she was drawn in quite easily by this woman that she barely knew. So it was quite a difficult situation to be in. But it was a really interesting movie, I thought, with a really good concept. It was just let down for me by its pacing, and there wasn't enough development for the main characters. But I did really appreciate the subtle nods to classic horror movies like Carrie and recent ones like The Witch. And I'm not sure whether it was intentional or not, but it made it really interesting. And it had a lot of good horror directing with some good suspenseful sequences. But some of the performances were a little bit over the top. So it's quite difficult to invest in the characters and get emotionally involved in what was happening. But apart from that, it was a decent movie. I did enjoy it. I just think it needed a little bit of a tighter script. But it was a good time, and I'm excited to see what else the director comes up with. Thank you.